What is up, everyone? This is the Quantum Anomaly coming back with you a little bit more Kerbal Space Program. Okay, so what have I done since we last launched the satellite? I did go ahead and I had to relaunch the satellite because I did not fully understand all of the communications, how they worked, and it didn't have the right kind of communications on it. But I went ahead and moved it into a polar orbit as well, um, to make sure that we could properly scan for resources. So here we have the SteamSat-1, and we can show different kinds of resources that are on the planet that we've scanned for. And so we've got them highlighted there, which I rather enjoy. I'm also just kind of learning how the new resource scanning works. I think there's a little bit of a bug in the map from the tracking station, but that's not a huge deal. I mean, it does kind of bother me that I can't access the resource overlay from here. I feel like I should. Some of the old mods allowed you to, some of the older map making mods would allow you to access the resources from here, and I may need like ScanSat or something like that to do that properly, but I don't really want to mess with it. Another thing you see here is I did get the 1.2 dev version of MechJeb installed. I do need to get the MechJeb for all mod because I don't like having to add the AR202 case to every single vehicle just to get MechJeb to work on it, especially some of the smaller satellites and stuff. So we do need to do that. But in the meantime, let's see here, actually. Alright, so we have built, so the next thing that we need is I need a better satellite network. I want to make sure that I have, now this isn't really necessary, but I want to do it anyway, just again, building up some of my experience in doing some standard launches and things like that. So what we have here is a satellite launch rocket. So what I need is 4 satellites in basically geosynchronous orbit. This will give me full coverage of all 4. So here, actually, let's go out of here. We'll come back to it. So there we go. Go to the tracking station. Okay, we'll be able to show a little bit better. So we have Kerbin here, which is great. And we'll always be able to communicate with the moon because the moon will always have line of sight of Kerbin. But the further out we go, other planets and things could block line of sight to Kerbin and cut out our communications. So right now, Duna's over here, Kerbin's here. If we drew like a straight line, Eve could block our communications path. Now I know that that's not entirely how the current communication system works in Kerbal Space Program, but it is kind of the way that ScanSat works, and I am going to go ahead and kind of follow at least some of those rules to establish some communications networks and just kind of play around with it. Again, like I said, just kind of getting some more satellites up in orbit. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put 4 satellites in orbit around Kerbin, and they're going to rotate at the same speed that Kerbin rotates. That's geosynchronous, so basically not moving. They kind of stay stationary in the sky in relation to a point on the ground, because they're moving at the same orbital velocity as the rotation of the planet. And what that's going to do is allow me to have kind of an unobstructed line of sight. So I'll basically always be able to have line of sight to one of those satellites. This polar satellite will help as well, so being able to have this satellite up top, it can communicate with one of these satellites out on the edge and then relay a single signal out to another planet. And we're going to do that with this kind of quad satellite rocket that I have loaded up here. And loading. It does take a little bit longer because I have just so many mods installed, but I don't mind it too much. Alright, so this is a 3-stage rocket. So we've got these side-mounted boosters. They're just going to give us a little bit of extra lift through the thicker atmosphere. when they run out of fuel, they'll eject off, and they actually cross-feed their fuel into this center tank while this main engine runs. So this main engine and these 4 side engines are going to run at the same time, but this tank isn't going to empty any because it's going to draw fuel off of these side tanks. So these are going to burn for a shorter amount of time, but it leaves us with a full tank for the larger engine to burn. So these will burn and blast off. This will burn, it'll also jettison, and that'll leave us with this engine bay right here. So this is the core of the capsule. I've got to get this to a 2,000 kilometer orbit, and I'm going to do that so that each of the 4 satellites only have to make a small orbital insertion up to the geosynchronous orbit. That'll give me a little bit of delay. The main piece will sit behind as these guys move ahead and get into their final positions. I'm hoping that I have everything I need on them. I do need to make sure that I install mech jet model. I was thinking about going back and doing this after I get the mech jet brawl installed, but I figure we can just do this way for now. It'll keep the weight evenly distributed on the rocket. Okay, that's good. And it also shouldn't weigh too much. I've got reaction wheels on each of these satellites, so they should be able to do pretty well with that. Alright, so with that said, this is going to be a longer insertion burn by far to get up into orbit. And I'm probably going to go ahead and do some post-editing and just speed some of this up so that it'll make a little bit more sense. And then I might do a little bit of post commentary after that, and we'll see what happens and how we go. So let's go ahead and get this guy launched, and I will talk to you guys after the post commentary. Alright, and we're back. So I I have done this before, but I think I did it with 3 and not 4. So this is not, by far, not the best set of communication lines, but it's not terrible. It's more trapezoidal than anything, and I'll take that. But now, and also we're like 0.75 meters per second off from being perfectly synchronous, but that's okay. And you can see here the nice little, the polar orbit guy getting his communication lines all up, 2 to 3 satellites at a time. Not bad. So yeah, this is not perfectly geostationary. One satellite will, let's see if I can, yeah, will drift very slowly away from its stationary point. Let's see if we can get a good view of where this guy's stationary point is. So he's kind of over the little inverted Italy looking spot there. It's about where he's sticking, yeah. So it'll drift really slowly away from that. Oops, I don't really need that much time acceleration going on. But that's okay, because they're all in about the same orbit, so even if they drift a little bit back and forth, no big deal. Plus they have tons of xenon gas to run the ion engines with, so not gonna be that big of a deal if I need to go, if I ever want to go back and adjust these orbits to get them, square them up a little bit. This guy's way behind where he needs to be, and this guy's a little bit in front of where he needs to be. This one's not so bad. He needs to be down about here. This guy needs to be way over. But that's okay, because that's a perfectly Kerbal thing to do. Because a Kerbal space program, it's less about being perfect, at least for me, and more about just getting to where you want to be. So let's flip this guy over. Get some more sunlight on the front portion of it there. There we go. Yeah. So, I mean, we got our little communication satellite. It's pretty awesome. I'm a fan of it. I like this design a lot. Oh, hey, you know what I did not do? I did not add these to... oh, that sucks. I didn't add these to the action group for extending everything out. Dang it, I didn't even realize that until I got all of them deployed. Alright, so which one are we on? We're on this one. Alright, let's just move forward. We'll get all these extended, and that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. I don't have a whole lot else built, but I guess we could go into plans. So for the time being, I want to, so I've got a ton of mods installed, as I've said before. I have a life support mod installed, one that I've not actually played with too much before, so it's the USI life support. Now, the cool thing about this mod is that there are a ton of different kind of methodologies on Kerbal lore, and not a whole lot of the actual Kerbal lore is really explained in the game, and I kind of like that. It leaves things up to the imagination. Now, in my eyes, Kerbals are little green men, which means they are plant-based of some sort. But they're finicky little jerks, and even though they can survive without food, they like their snacks. Now, some of that is, snacks is a thing that is definitely part of the lore. Just having snacks, being eaten by Kerbals or stolen by other Kerbals. It's just a thing that the game does, you know, to provide some lore. But the USI life support mod, so what it does is Kerbals can survive without food because they're plant-based, but they won't work without snacks. So, you know, your life support is in the form of snacks and power. So basically, they've got to have TV and snacks. Otherwise, they will not do any sort of. They get grumpy. Basically, is what happens. And I think that's fair. I think anybody, you know, nowadays gets pretty grumpy if they don't have internet, TV, and snacks. That's just kind of the base level life support, right? So That's what the USA Life Support mod does. I'm also using the entire USA Colonization pack, well, almost all of it, and that's going to provide quite a bit of additional challenge insofar as getting self-sufficient bases running, and that's something that I'm going to want pretty soon. But I'm starting with this satellite network to ensure that I can get some robotic access. Plan on probably going to the moon, or Mun, and so this is where we're going to go. Let's focus our view over there. Let's go to the moon. I'm going to need to get a polar satellite into orbit so that we can scan it for resources. Then I need to get some kind of resource mining started so that I can start getting a construction base off-site. That's also probably going to require me to get some Kerbals landed so that we can actually have some engineers to build some stuff on the moon. And our goal is going to be getting at least a semi-self-sufficient base going on the moon so that it only needs minor deliveries of parts, and or a fully self-sufficient base so that it doesn't require any deliveries at all. Now, we do also have Minmus, which is the other moon of the Kerbin system, but its gravity is ridiculously low. And though this is a good thing when it comes to how much fuel it takes to land on it, it's a bad thing because stuff bounces. It's very, very bouncy and very kind of tedious to keep stuff grounded. I like the moon better as far as a target for setting up a base. Now, it is a little bit more difficult because we got a lot of craters to deal with, but we do have some fairly flat land in some of these larger craters, and I think there's some pretty good resources that are usually available in them as well. So, next mission will be getting a polar satellite set up around the moon, and possibly, I don't know if I'm going to need a network of satellites around the moon. I don't think I will for my polar satellite, as long as I do my polar burn on this side of the moon, or probably going down. I don't know what would happen if my satellite is on the far side of the moon, and the moon would be blocking my communication lines. So I may need to set up a satellite orbit here. If I do, I'm basically going to take the same rocket that we used for this, and I probably have enough delta V as it is to get it to the moon. I deorbited the main fuel pod that carried the satellites and crashed it back into the planet because I don't like junk in my space. No junk. So yeah, I'm going to work on that. I'm going to get a resource satellite, probably similar to the one that we have over here on Kerbin, wherever it is. There we go. So we may do the SteamSat 2. We'll get that, and maybe with a couple of minor tweaks, I may want a longer antenna because these antennas are fairly short range. They do offer direct control, which is fine, but I may go ahead and keep kind of this same setup, or I may even, I don't know, I may change this setup completely. But a similar satellite to this, we're going to put in orbit around the moon, and then if we need to, we will also set up some lunar stationary satellites. You can see the moon in the distance. I love that. I love that you can actually see the other planets and stuff in game. It's at a distance. I'm pretty sure you can see all of the planets. There's like telescope mods that allow you to see the tiny dots that are the other planets as you move around. I am not really that keen on doing it because I can see them from map view. So yeah, short-term goal, get to the moon, get a construction base going. Long-term goal is this boy here. So I've landed on and had some bases on Duna, and Duna is the Mars-like planet of the Kerbal system. So it also has its own moon, Gilly. Or, I'm sorry, not Gilly. I'm thinking of the other one. Ike. I think Gilly is around Eve. Yeah, so Duna and Ike. So this is your Mars analogous planet. Has a very thin atmosphere, some big frozen ice caps, a few big craters, some rivery looking things around it. This is where I want to go. I've got some really cool stuff that I want to do here, and get a miner base set up there. But that's going to be our long-term goal, is to get a base set up on Duna. But to do it, I want to get a good space, or a good base set up on, on Kerbin, if it's going to let me focus over there. I need to get a little bit closer and pick out some stuff. Nope, I don't want to maneuver. I'm going to have to go back to the station, aren't I? Okay, that's fine. We can go back there anyway. Yeah, rambling. So, we need a base on the moon because it takes a lot of fuel and Delta V and all of that good stuff to get off of Kerbin. Kerbin's got a really thick atmosphere, and it takes a much smaller rocket to get off the surface of the moon than it does to get off the surface of a big gravity-laden, thick atmosphered planet like Kerbin. So that's our goal. Get to the moon, get a base set up, and eventually get some Kerbals there. Hopefully it'll probably start off as a robotic base. We'll do some minor robotic missions and find good landing spots and things like that, and then we'll start bringing Kerbals over and messing around with our crazy life support and colonization mods. These add a lot of complexity to the game, but I'm excited about playing around with it. So until next time, and for everybody else out there, keep building!